Audio recording. He's quite the quick draw on the recording gun. Okay, here we go. So our second session together, and our final one. I've been asked just to substitute for two of them. On history and mechanics of Torah She-Baal. Okay, so last week, Joe, it's good actually. It's not good. It's terrible to be late. It's terrible. How could you start late? But actually, I had some technical difficulties, so we just started ourselves also. So no big one this time. So we can blame you, Joe, but I think it was my camera. So we last week we did what I found was one fundamental examples of Torah She-Baal Peh, which created the foundation of the understanding of our appreciation of what Torah She-Baal Peh is. What I want to do is give you another one. This one's from Gemara. This one you've probably heard of on either in its entirety or some line from it or semblance of it, some kind of story. It's famous. It's one of those that people know. And if you don't know it, then it's less famous than I thought. But it's one that, again, is essential to the understanding of the mechanics and history of Torah She-Baal Peh. This is really the Gemara's way, as opposed to the Mishna last week, the Gemara's way of truly describing what we're supposed to do. And when I first learned this Gemara, it was good. It was important. Learning from Bava Metzia is always good. And okay, it's one of these, you walk away saying, But then I asked a couple of questions afterwards to myself, and I feel like there's something deeper between the lines. Even after we've understood the brilliant significance of the words themselves, there's something that takes it one step further, and it's that one step further which I feel really gives us the true understanding of what Torah She-Baal Peh is supposed to do for us. This is good, but it's the next level which makes it better. Okay, so we'll do it step at a time, obviously, but we have to understand that while the Gemara is great, I feel that there's something even more important that we'll take beyond. So again, if you've seen this Gemara, it could very well be that it's a review, which is always important, or something new, or you've seen something. But even if you've even had some kind of exposure to this Gemara, I think we might take it tonight one step further, which will add to its understanding and its poignancy. Okay, so here we go. Well, I'm going to read it first through. Although it's in Gemara, it's a Tana, i.e., it's a Tanaic source, so it's going to be in Hebrew, so it's not going to be as hard as breaking our teeth through Aramaic, but it's still Hebrew. So, and I broke it up myself. This is editor's breakup to give us a bit of a structure to it. But again, in Gemara, it's all together. Okay. So here we go. Tana. There was a Tanaic source. Now, there's a lot more antecedent action to this source, but basically there was this question about whether you can metaher, whether you can purify this particular model of oven, okay, whether it's purifiable, okay? And Rabbi Eliezer said one thing, and everybody else, led by Rabbi Yeshua, said another. Okay, and that's basically the antecedent action, back and forth, and they were arguing about whether you can purify this tanur. Okay, but again, the particular item is not as important as the subsequent conversation. So, the Oto Hayom, on that day, where they were discussing this oven and its purification process, Heshiv Rabbi Eliezer kol tshuvot shebe'olam v'lo kiblu himenu. He gave him every response possible. He hit him with every single logical argument, the groups of rabbis that he was trying to convince, and they just didn't accept it. They just said, no way, it's not happening. It's just, we say one thing, you say the other. So Amar Lahem. So he tried a different tact. So Rabbi Eliezer said that, Im halacha k'moti. If the halacha is like me, charuv ze yochiach. He pointed to a carob tree and said the carob tree is going to prove the rightness of my opinion. How so? Ne'ekar charuv mimkomo mea ama. V'amila arba ma'ot ama. So all of a sudden this carob tree was uprooted from its place. They say either 100 amot, which again, amah is about 1.5 feet, so what is it, 150 feet? And some people say 400 amot, 600 feet. Okay? So that was his proof. He said, if I'm right, this carob tree is going to prove it. Lo and behold, miraculously, this carob tree was uprooted and it flew however distance. Amrulo, the group of rabbis said back to him, Ein mevi'in ra'aya min hacharuf. Carob trees don't prove nothing. Nice try, but we're still not accepting it. Okay. So he tried again. Chazar v'amar lahem, here, he went back and he said, okay, im halacha k'moti, if the halacha is like me as opposed to you, amat hamayin yochichu. This irrigation ditch will prove it. It's called irrigation ditch called amat hamayin because usually it was amma by amma, so it's called an amat hamayin. Okay, so this irrigation ditch this irrigation ditch will prove it. How so? Chazru amat hamayin la'achorehem. That the irrigation ditch actually reversed its direction. Okay, it was flowing east-west, and now it's flowing west-east. Amrulo, so these rabbis said back to him, Ein mevin rayam, amat hamayin. Also doesn't work. That's very nice little special effects, but that doesn't prove a thing. Chazar v'amar lahem, his third attempt, im halacha k'moti kotlei beit hamidrash yochichu. These walls of the Beit Midrash will prove my opinion is correct. He too kotlei beit hamidrash lipol. The walls of the Beit Midrash began to lean in. It began to fall down to prove the rightness of Rabbi Eliezer. Ga'ar bahem Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua criticized the walls, saying to them, Amar lahem, im tamidei chachamim menatzchim ze et ze b'halacha, atem mativchem. If rabbis, right, tamidei chachamim, are fighting back and forth within a halacha, what's it to you guys? Who are you guys? What role do you have here, walls? So, lo naflu mipnei kvodo Rabbi Yoshua. So they didn't end up falling because of Rabbi Yoshua's claim, because of his kavod. But the lo zakfu, but they didn't go back upright mipnei kvodo Rabbi Eliezer. But they still wouldn't go all the way because of Rabbi Eliezer's kavod. Ve'adain matim ve'omdim, and they are still leaning and standing. I mean, they're still in that askew position. Okay. So again, the wall didn't work, right? Because they didn't do what Rabbi Eliezer said. Last one. Chazar v'amar lahem. Now he's going to call in the big guns. Im halacha kamoti min hashamayim yochichu. I've got God on the bench. If you didn't believe my starters, you'll certainly believe my sixth man. Yatzda Batko ve'amra. So a heavenly voice came out and said, Ma lachem etzel Rabbi Eliezer shehalacha kimoto b'chol makom. What are you messing with, Rabbi? He's my man. Everybody knows the halacha is like him everywhere and all the time. God says, this is me, God talking, the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. So of course Rabbi Eliezer sits back and says, sure, okay, carob trees and irrigation ditches and walls don't do it, but God just came out, I'm home free. Amad Rabbi Yehoshua al Raglav. So Rabbi Yehoshua, as opposed to the wall thing, I guess he was sitting down. Now he finds it necessary to stand up. Amar lo bashamayim. It's not in the heavens. So then the Gemara continues, my lo bashamayim. Meaning, what does it mean? What does it mean it's not in the heavens? What's he quoting? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Shekvar not Torah mehar Sinai. Because the Torah was already given in Har Sinai. Ein anu mashkichin b'batko, and therefore we do not listen to batko. Not that God is wrong. He can be right, but we are not forced to listen to him. Why? Shekvar katva b'Har Sinai b'Torah. Because already the Torah we got from Har Sinai was written acharei rabim lahatot. You follow the majority. And Rabbi Eliezer is the dat yachid. He's the minority opinion. He's the one guy against the group. And it doesn't matter what God says, because God said in the Torah, acharei rabim lahatot. Okay, and halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer, because it's not acharei rabim lahatot. That's it. That's the sojourn. Okay, that's the story. Okay, so if we're gonna lay it out here, we could do 1, 2, 4, and 3. Right? If we want to break it up. Right? 4 attempts at proofs. Each one was bested in some way. Interestingly, the first 2 really don't have any reasonings. We don't take proofs from them. It doesn't prove one thing or the other. The Kotlim shouldn't be in the fray to begin with, says Rabbi Yoshua, and then God is basically rejected. his opinion, again, his opinion is rejected. Once when I was teaching, and after a couple of times I was teaching in Midrash Harova, things get taken out of context. So we're talking about Pirkei Avot, and I often want to show how universal Pirkei Avot is. It's not specifically Torah or mitzvot, but it's something of human nature and something essential to almost individuals as men, as Jews, but not necessarily religious per se, which obviously is all part and parcel of the same thing. So often girls will say, oh, but you have to love God. And then I said, forget about God. And of course, that sounds terrible if someone's walking past. I always say, no, just now. So again, they don't reject God, they reject God's opinion. Okay? So this is the story. So what do you think? Meaning, why do we need to know this story? I guess it's a general lesson. Okay, God says what he says, but we don't have to listen to him. Great. But it's verbose. There's a lot of words here for Gemara. Because if we want to say what we could have said that last line. Lo b'shamayim hi, let's move on. Right? If we do this right, then we have to take it apart textually. Right? There's too much symmetry here to allow us to almost ignore all the action that went on. And I would say that each and every step of the way in how it's laid out tells us that it's something we have to be aware of and take into consideration. Okay? There's symbolism and there's obvious metaphor. So the question is, what is it and what's being accomplished, and what therefore what is attempted to be accomplished, and what ultimately is denied. So what do you think? Meaning, let's do it this way. We have a charuv, which is the first attempt. We have an amat hamayim, which is the second. We have kotlei, beit hamidrash, is the third, and min hashamayim. Okay, those are our four. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it about those things? Why does Rabbi Eliezer, meaning all the Rabbi Shua represented by Rabbi Shua, but the majority always respond to his challenges. Right? They don't use their own. Right? But we have to ask ourselves why Rabbi Eliezer thought that a charuv, amat hamayim, kotlei beit midrash, and obviously min hashamayim, ultimately, are the best things to try to prove it. So Tila says, don't use subinat in halacha. Surely, of course. All right, we don't want to do that. But then I could, okay, but why a charuv and amat hamayim and kotlei beit midrash? I could say lightning. I could say, two-headed fish or four-headed fish, let's say. I know they found two-headed fish somewhere. What is it about? And again, I don't really know if this really happened this way. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The Gemara, however, wants us to understand the argument as this way. Okay, Sherry says food, water, and shelter. Food, water, and shelter. Okay, but so you want to say kotlei beit midrash are kotlim, and it happens to be that they're in the beit midrash, so those are the walls he wants to use. Okay. Okay, food, water, what about it? Is that a progression? Is Rabbi Eliezer saying, well, charuv didn't work, so amat hamayim is going to be better then? Or is it just three? So how does that work? Can't get away that easy, Sherry. What is this progression? What was he trying to prove with food, and why didn't it work? Take care of basic needs, then come to Torah. Okay. Okay. So water's basic, and then food. You can live longer without water, right? Because you can get your hydration from food. Longer without food, is that what it is? It's 3 days, and forgot my desert survival. Longer without food. Right. So shouldn't it be the opposite? That would be a problem, Sherry. I do the carrot first, close my Excellent. Excellent. Good. So now we know, again, now we know what's not right. So when we finally get right, we'll be able to understand the rightness better. Excellent. Good. Okay, so what else? Yeah. Right, because you can be sheltered as much as you want, but if you're very thirsty, it's not going to help. It's true. Right, window shades, but can I drink them? So what else? What do we got? What do we got? Right, we can leave Mina Shemayim out of this, right? 1, 2, and 3 are really in their own sections. So let's make a line, because Mina Shemayim is almost that he has to call in the big guns. So I'm just going to cut that off for now, so we can focus on 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so also tell me down to be squished instead of sheltered. It's true. It's true. I doubt they were going to, crush everything. Mina Shemayim is supposed to encompass first 3. Okay, sounds good. That somehow, on some level, it has to do that, or it trumps all 3. That even though Charuva, Matamayim, Kodlei, Beit Midrash, there are counter arguments, there shouldn't have been. Rabbi Eliezer wants to say there shouldn't have been a counter argument to Shemayim. That's for sure. That's for sure. Right? Mina Shemayim really encompasses, you said, encompasses everything, whether it's food or water or shelter. Okay, so let's do it this way. When you think of Charuf, what do you think? I mean, if you were an author and you needed, and you used, or you were an author yourself and a prophet in a cave, for sure, right? She-Baal Yochai. So, okay, so let's do it that way also. Why is that the tree that grew up next to Rav She-Baal Yochai's cave to live? I mean, what's the metaphor for Charuf? In general, and then Charuf specifically. Grows in the desert, okay? Bread. Carob bread, you mean? Huh, interesting. Yeah, but you can make bread out of barley and wheat too. I mean, what is it specifically about Charuf? So if you were an author and you're reading a book, or you're very well read, okay, good. Why? And what is it about Charuf? What's the characteristic of it? It grows wild, okay. Nutrition, certainly. So, okay, so let's do this. Let's do the general first, right? You were saying, Tila, you were focusing on, and that's what Sherry was saying, is that it's fruit, right? It's a Charuf tree is a fruit-bearing tree. Excellent, and it grows quickly. Now, so it represents almost like a sustenance, right? A providing for, a living by, which we had said food was. But what about Charuf as opposed to apples and oranges and grapes? Good, but so are apples and oranges. Carob? Really? Just chew on it for a while? Okay, so apples. How's that? But what is it about a Charuf in particular? Yeah, it's true. All right. Well, that's the thing, is even when it's dried out, you can eat it. Why? It's a long-lasting. So it's not only representing fruit, which is sustenance and providing for, but it's also one that is long-lasting. You can take it off the tree and store it, which is why it grew up next to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's cave, because it was almost like the ultimate snack. Okay? So not only, so what does Rabbi Eliezer want to say? You've got this Charuf, which represents continuity, sustenance, long-lasting. So what does he say? How is it going to be used? How is it a vehicle of proving his point? What's he saying when it's ne'ekar, when it's uprooted? What's his message? What's he trying to demonstrate? Good. Yeah. And but it's ne'ekar though, which is interesting. It's uprooting this tree. So it actually sounds like his opinion is a cutting off of life, which theoretically would be a terrible thing to say. So what's he trying to express to them when he uproots it? So it's going to get fired. We always somehow picture the tree as being rerooted. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily say that. All it says is an ekar. It was uprooted and went 100 mile away or 400 mile away. It doesn't necessarily say that it was then replanted. It sounds like it's the uprooting which is the key. So what he is probably expressing to them is, okay. Again, and he wants to make sure his opinion is accepted. Right? He's sitting there with a jar, one, and these are some things. So they're probably in Israel still. This is earlier, before the Galut, if they're tonight. Okay, so what he's probably saying is, what's wrong? My opinion is, because remember, this Charuv was supposed to prove the power. We lost sound. Nothing going on here. Let's see. Yeah, it's working. Possibly selecting this one, but that's just gonna laugh at your answer, Tehila. Are we back? They actually told me from the web. Okay. Yeah, no, huh? Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm going to report this to the authorities. But okay. Okay. So I wasn't laughing at your answer, Tehila. It was more of a. The point is, if they're Tanaim, they're still in Eretz Yisrael. They're still in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it wouldn't be a Torah of Galut. And what the point I was trying to make is he's trying to prove the validity of his opinion. So you wouldn't want to make it that, oh, it's because we're in Galut. It's second. So again, if he says the I guess simply what we could say is, look, my opinion is, my uproot this tree. Are you serious? Okay. Okay. Is this better? It might be that I have to close. Oh no. I've frozen also? Is that the point? Yeah. Okay. They told me about this. Okay. Okay. Let's try to. Only doing one video? Yeah, that's what they told me. Oh, is it that bad that we have to try to restart it? Okay. It's okay now. So we'll try it, and then I'll try Joel's. I'll try Joel's suggestion of restarting the conference if it doesn't work. But I think maybe if we cut down to one video, that would work. It's a shame. Okay. So again, what I think simply is that he is saying, my opinion is so great that it can uproot nature. It can uproot sustenance. He's not trying to destroy nature. What he's trying to prove is the solidity of his opinion. Look what I can do. My opinion is so great that this charuv, which represents sustenance and long life and continuity, is uprooted in the face of my opinion, of my rightness. So you guys, you have to believe me, right? Because again, supernaturally, miraculously, something is telling us that right? Something is more solid than earth, because the earth sustains, but I can anti-sustain. I can uproot that which sustains. Okay? So what's the response? All they say is, Ein mivin raya min hacharuv. You can't prove anything from a charuv. The question is why? I mean, why isn't his opinion proven? Yeah, but why don't we care? But that's the ultimate answer. They don't say that now. They say, charuv, nice try, but a charuv doesn't prove anything. The question is, how come? Let me ask you this. What's the limitation of a charuv? It is long-lasting, it has continuity, represents sustenance. But what's its, let's call it, one major limitation? Can't think, certainly, but we're talking about sustenance. We're talking about that which provides. Exactly, very good, Sherry. I would say it's limited in its available resources. It needs water to grow, it needs sun to grow, it needs dirt to grow, i.e. it is limited by its locale. So when rabbis say, this is what I think they're responding to him, the reason you can't get a raya from a charuv is because what you did was just destroy, cut off the charuv. So while you might have proved your power of your opinion, you didn't prove its rightness, you didn't advance anything. Yeah, okay, so you uprooted something that was limited to its space. Great, but you cut it off. You killed it. It's now. So it's great, like when people, like, I don't know, if you ever see a book or a movie that says, you can kill people, but alive again, right? That's the real power. So this is great. So you can knock over a tree. It doesn't prove the rightness. It just merely proves, and I'll put it in here because we can use it. What you're proving is you're a great Rob, which we're all agreeing to, and your opinions have power. It doesn't mean, though, it doesn't prove, though, that it's any more right than ours. Okay, so then he takes the amat hamayim. Now, theoretically, we can assume literarily this amat hamayim has to be one better, i.e. it has to address the deficiency of the charuv. So how is the amat hamayim similar to a charuv? And then we have to figure out why is it better, i.e. to help with his issue. Right, how is it an amat hamayim? Why does he use that image? How is it similar to a charuv? Exactly, right? It once again sustains life. It provides, whether it's irrigation, whether it's food for fish, whether it's for fields and so on, and people to drink. Meaning it's like a charuv in that it sustains and provides. So again, if his opinion has the power to affect something that sustains, look how powerful his opinion is. However, how is it different or better proof than the charuv? Oh, so Tehillah, you said it. Okay. So even the passage, meaning amat hamayim is ever moving. Unlike a charuv, that's the point. Excellent. Unlike the charuv, which is stationary and therefore limited, comes Rabbi Eliezer and says, I'll give you something that, again, like a charuv, sustains from nature, and I can affect nature. Oh, we'll get to this deal, exactly. There's a whole process there, but it's ever moving. It's not stationary. It's not dependent specifically on where it is. And look what I can do to it. My opinion is so right that it can change an amat hamayim's direction. It can reverse nature. It can reverse the gravitational pull or the slopes or however the reason why the amat hamayim is flowing the way it's flowing. Yes, good, for sure. But I guess ultimately he's tapping into God until he has to say, God, you're going to have to say this for me. They're not getting this, or it's not working. Right? So he really is saying from the beginning, he's saying God is taking care of this with his miraculous things. But they're not getting it through those vehicles, so he has to get God. No. I think he's just trying, because he's picking very specific things to represent his opinion. And again, nobody's surprised by what he's doing. Notice. They're just saying, that's nice, but it's not proving anything. Right? Nobody's saying, wow, that's amazing. If you can do so many miracles, it must be. Look, in the end, God speaks, and they're not so impressed. right? So he says, look what I can do. I can reverse the natural order of things. But then they say, Ein mevin ra'aya me'amat hamayim. So why doesn't amat hamayim prove his rightness? Torah not given to nature. Okay, but again, he's using nature as just a reflection of his opinion's effectiveness. Yeah, it's true. You're right. Nature can, but he's not. You're right. Okay, fine. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So what's the limitation, however, of amat hamayim? It's still earthbound, okay, which is why Kotlei Beit Midrash might be better than that, Tila and Sherry, okay. But what has he done? What has he done to the amat hamayim? And this is perhaps why it's unlike Moshe. So let's do it this way. What hasn't he done? Well, what's their rebuttal? It's nice. You changed the direction. Exactly. It's still water. It's still going as fast as it did before. It's still irrigating the way it's supposed. It's still giving water, meaning it's exactly the same thing. You've just turned its direction. So they turn around and say, that's nice. And while we will agree, your opinion has such power that it can add to nature, it hasn't changed nature, which is what Moshe did. He turned water to blood. Right? It's nice. You made, and your opinion is an addition to the laws we previously had. There's no doubt. But again, it doesn't prove the rightness because all it did was change a direction of that which was already in process. You haven't changed the halachic process. You've reordered it, which we're willing to accept. You have your own opinion. That's what opinions are of great Rabbanim. But it doesn't prove that your opinion is more right than the other. It just proves once again that you have a power to add to the list of a pre-existing truth. Like you said before, Tila, I think it was Tila, you changed the direction, it's still flowing. That's all it did. Now, it's pretty powerful to change the direction of a water flowing, but that's all you did. It's still water flowing. So while it's powerful, and while it might be an addition, it's still not proving rightness. So then he goes to Kotlei Beit HaMidrash. Okay, now what is that image? Obviously, he's left nature. Nature's not working. So what do Kotlei Beit HaMidrash represent? And notice, by the way, it's Kotlei Beit HaMidrash, not Ketalim, but Kotlei Beit HaMidrash. What's he trying to prove through them? Or what? Let's do it this way. What do Kotlei Beit HaMidrash represent? Good. Okay. And I'm not sure. Again, it doesn't have to be kids necessarily. Exactly. Meaning this represents the rabbi's Torah. This represents Torah on earth. This represents the man-made definition of Torah, which is what Rabbi Eliezer is trying to prove. So what can he do if he bows the walls to his opinion? What has he theoretically proven? If the walls of the Beit HaMidrash cave to his opinion, it means that man's Torah, exactly, right? Man's Torah on this earth bow to his opinion, which should theoretically be a perfect demonstration of, look, my opinion must be right, because all of our Torah is bowing to me, is caving to me. Should be perfect. But unfortunately, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua steps up and says, it's not about you, walls. We're fighting here. We're arguing here. Yeah, but this is L'Shem Shemayim. No pun intended. Right? Yeah, well, that's what he's saying. Meaning, we're arguing here. What's it to you? Meaning, what's the issue? What are the walls of the Beit Midrash? Meaning, which define which? Is it the walls that define the Torah, or the Torah that defines the walls? Obviously, exactly. Obviously, it's the latter, meaning the Kotlei Beit HaMidrash are only significant because the Torah is within it. So Rabbi Eli, well, I don't know, because Rabbi Yeshua says, if the rabbis are arguing, what role do you have in this argument? Because you're just what is created after the fact. You're just the house for the Torah that's going on. Exactly. So it's not one needs the other. It's that the Beit Midrash is defined by the man's Torah and not the other way around. And if that's so, Rabbi Yeshua says, you have no place here. You better go back up. But on the other hand, they have to bow down because there is a strength of opinion here. But notice they never go up or down again. They have to stay where they are. Exactly. It's defined by the rabbis, fences, walls, exactly. So what this has proven is, again, that his opinion is different. Meaning, Rabbi Yeshua says the walls should go up, and Rabbi Elazar says the walls should go down. Great. Your opinion is different. No problem. Again, we are willing to accept the fact that you have a difference of opinion, that it's an addition to the previous compendium of halacha, and it's a very powerful opinion. But none of your proofs prove you're more right than we are. And you can see why he has to use, we can see much more between the lines here, what's going on. Okay? So then he calls out to God, because that should be, God is the author of Torah. And there's no doubt that rabbis are dependent on God as opposed to vice versa. So this should be better than the Kotlei Beit Midrash, because now we're dealing with way beyond nature, and we're dealing with way beyond man's Torah. We're dealing with God's Torah. So if God turns around and says, Rabbi Elazar, you are correct, that's it. There should be no argument whatsoever. And of course, that's what God says. Right? Why are you arguing with him? Because halacha k'moto b'chol makom. Should be the end of the argument. But Rabbi Yeshua says, Lo b'shamayim. Now, what does that mean? Rabbi Yirmiyah explains. Shekvar natna Torah mehar Sinai. The Torah was already given, meaning it's out of God's hands. And it says in that Torah the rule with which we are following to say that Rabbi Yeshua and his peers are correct and Rabbi Elazar is, or let's do it this way, are to be followed and Rabbi Elazar is not to be followed. We're not talking about right and wrong, we're talking about what is halacha l'maaseh. The Torah said, gave us a system with which to follow, therefore when God turns around and goes against that system, we do not have to heed that counter system. And now here's the point, however, and I want to make sure this is very clear. Okay? Yeah, but God can't even be called as a witness. So forensics probably could. Okay? Here's the key. Shekfar kataf b'har Sinai b'Torah. Okay? This is the key. And they're going after Acharei Rabim Lahatot. They are still following God's intent. Right? So ultimately, while they are defying God by saying Lo b'shamayim, i.e. we're not following what you just said, God, about Rabbi Elazar, we are really following you, God. Because in Har Sinai, this is what you intended. Okay? So Acharei Rabim Lahatot is God's intent. And that's what we're allowed to follow because the Torah is out of God's hands, Lo b'shamayim anymore, because it was already given on Har Sinai. So we are therefore to follow it. And it, from God, told us that Acharei Rabim Lahatot is a valid opinion. That's what we're following to say Rabbi Elazar is not to be followed halachically, and we are to be followed halachically. Even though God turns around and says, he says Rabbi Elazar is correct. Okay? So it's a counter of God's intent. Torah Jews and no, because it's the majority of Torah Jews. I mean, it's the Rabbim, not of the majority of the world, the majority of halachic incisors. Okay? So now, good story. Pretty fairly powerful. Right? But here's I actually have three questions. and I would, if we had a little more time, I would give you time to ponder them. But here are my 3 questions. Okay. 1. Why do we need Lo B'Shamayim Hi and Acharei Rabim La'atot? Meaning, why not just say the reason why we're not following Rabbi Eliezer is because the Torah says Acharei Rabim La'atot, and the Torah is from Har Sinai, and it's so. Why do we need Lo B'Shamayim? Just hold that for a second. 2, if you read, which I quoted you here, the context of Lo B'Shamayim, which is here, there's nothing to do with how Rabbi Yehoshua quotes it. In Dvarim it says, Ki ha-mitzvah hazot, the Torah, asher anochi metzavcha hayom, says Moshe, lo nifleiti mimcha v'lo rechokahi. It's not too wondrous for you, it's not too far from you. Lo b'shamayim. It's not in the sky, le'mor, mi ya'aleh lanu ha-shamayim v'ikachena lanu v'ishmienu ota b'nasena. Who, it's not in the skies that you have to that you will say, who will go up to the skies and get it. V'lo me'ever la'yamhi. Which is the parallel to this one, and it's not across the ocean that you would have to say who's going to go across the ocean to get it for us. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od. It's very close to you. B'ficha u'b'vavcha la'asoto. You can do it on your own. It has nothing to do with it's out of God's hands, it's into ours. Rabbi Yeshua is basically quoting out of context, and this is the line people quote all the time. Lo b'shamayim. If you quote it from the Torah itself, this is where it comes from, though. Lo b'shamayim. The one Acharei Rabim La'atot is halachic from Mishpatim. That's exactly what it is. When it's talking about when you follow laws, Acharei Rabim La'atot. It's perfect context. Lo b'shamayim is the wrong one. And lastly, why do we need all this? They give you a break. This is pretty powerful. And this is the one that proves it. What, we need to see the suffering and the defeat of Rabbi Eliezer so we get to the ultimate one? And you know what? If you want to say, oh, you have to see what fits and what doesn't. No. If you say, Lo b'shmaimi, that God, if the story was, Rabbi Eliezer said, but God says, and God comes out, and Rabbi Yeshua says what he says, and it's over, I don't need more than that. I don't need a charuv and a matamayim and kotlei beit midrash. That's pretty powerful on its own. Okay? So why do I need both? How can Rabbi Yeshua be quoting Lo b'shamayim seemingly out of context, and why do I need the pre-action? Okay, those are the 3 questions we have to answer. And the answer will bring us to what I think is the even more elevated significance. Okay, ready? I know I'd love to give you time to ponder. Maybe you can certainly ponder, get back to me, email or whatever. Ideas that you might have different than mine, but I want to present mine just to make sure we get it out as a closure, and then if you can offer others, that would be certainly appreciated. Okay? So again, bottom line, Rabbi Yeshua tells us, Acharei Rabim La'atot, meaning you can't create halacha as an individual. You can't create halacha. You can't make halacha based on the power of that halacha, based on the effect that halacha has, the addition it adds to the halacha compendium, and you can't base halacha because it's new and unique and different, and you can't base halacha on the fact that God says, oh, that's good, right? That it's something that God would want. You can't create halacha that way because Acharei Rabim La'atot. There is a technical equation with which to follow to create halacha. But Lo b'shamayim hi, and this is why Rabbi Yeshua quotes it first. Lo b'shamayim hi tells us, if in the correct context, Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od b'ficha u'b'vavcha la'asoto. Lo b'shamayim refers us to the idea that the Torah is ours, not to create the Torah. Because ki ha-mitzvah hazot, it's already a mitzvah. It's already commanded, it's already solid. And Acharei Rabim La'atot is a way of elucidating or understanding or applying that halacha. But Lo b'shamayim, he tells us, that we are commanded as individuals, ki karov elecha, singular, individual, Hadavar ma'od b'ficha u'bilvavcha, in our mouths and in our hearts to do it. We are commanded as individuals to appreciate the Torah. Creation of the Torah and halacha, that's for the Rabbi. But what is the obligation of the individual? Rabbi Eliezer, you're wrong. You were saying the individual can create it. It's not true. But what the individual can do is appreciate it. And how do you appreciate it, i.e. personalize it, make it your own, is understanding and appreciating its power, understanding and appreciating what it adds to your life, and understanding and appreciating how it's different and unique and inspiring. And of course, understanding how it reflects God's intent. This Gemara is giving us a twofold facet of mitzvot. There's the what we do, and then there's the why we do it. The what we do is a technical system. Acharei Rabbi Mlatot. And Rabbi Yeshua says, Rabbi Eliezer, you were trying the wrong thing as an individual. You can't get around the fact that the Torah, God told us that halacha is created by the Rabbi. But the second facet, and Rabbi Yeshua is telling us it is just as vital, is as the individual, we have to personalize the mitzvot. Shabbat, you have to do. You can't turn on the light. You can't sift. You can't separate. You can't cook. But it's upon us, after we know what the halacha is, right or wrong, to then turn around and say, but why? What does God want us to feel? How does He want us to be inspired by and appreciate these halachot? It's the power of this halacha, what it can actually do for us on Shabbat to elevate the day, to appreciate this, the message of Shabbat and God's authority, to understand how it adds to our life the seventh day as opposed to the other six, for example, to understand how this differentiates us, how this elevates us, how it turns us and makes a unique person, individual Jew, because of this unique behavior. And then to ultimately understand, therefore, why God has given us these halachot. And that's the twofold message Rabbi Yeshua is giving us. And that's the twofold dichotomous characteristic of Torah She-Baal Peh. Torah She-Baal Peh, on the one hand, is the rabbis that turn around and say, the Torah Shbichtav meant to tell you to do this and this and this. But the equally essential characteristic of Torah She-Baal Peh is now you have to understand why. You can do mitzvot, and that's 70% of the mitzvah is doing it the way the rabbi said you're supposed to do it. But if you want to do a mitzvah 100%, you have to appreciate why God / the rabbis want you to do a mitzvah. And that's why we need Lo B'Shamayim, and that's why we need the previous proofs that failed, because they failed in the wrong context. They were trying to achieve something which was incorrect, but they ultimately achieved the other side of Torah She-Baal Peh and Halacha, and that's the facets or the vehicles with which to appreciate what these mitzvot, as governed by the rabbis, are supposed to do. Okay? I do not believe Alan Goldenberg asked if the Yerushalmi has a similar argument. I do not think so. I do not think so, which wouldn't surprise me. Again, I haven't been all for Yerushalmi, but it wouldn't surprise me because halacha ultimately is gotten from Bavli first, i.e. that's our first mode because it was edited, because it was later. So I wouldn't be surprised if the rules of Torah She-Baal Peh as its formal treatise comes from Bavli, because that's where ultimately it stems, as opposed to Yerushalmi, which unfortunately became a secondary source, halachic source, nonetheless. Okay, that's what I think the story does. All right, so when someone next time quotes Lo B'Shamayim Hi, perhaps you have a different understanding and truly understand what Lo B'Shamayim Hi is saying, as opposed to Acharei Rabbi Mlatot. And I hope that Torah She-Baal Peh in the future, whether it's WebYeshiva class or whatever you're doing, as Torah She-Baal Peh explanations of Torah Shbichtav, you can understand a greater mission and hopefully elevate your religious worship just a little bit. And I'd love to have been doing a little piece of that. Give me a little bit of teaching pleasure. Okay, so there you go. There's my little sojourn in the realm of history and mechanics of Torah She-Baal Peh, and Shabbat Shalom. And I will see some of you next week in the Shmuel class or the Tanakh V'Alach class. Otherwise, it has been good to see you, Alan. Good to see you again. Tehila, I hope you come back soon. And Sherry, I'll see you next week. So Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Oh, and Howard too, of course.